was going to say, the Beaujolais Nouveau est arrivé. Happy Beaujolais Nouveau Day. When you're, I don't know what day obviously you're watching this on, but us today taping this, it is officially Beaujolais Nouveau Day, which is the third Thursday in November each year. So this is the day that Beaujolais Nouveau is released to the public all over the world, which is kind of cool. So just think, tonight when we're drinking this, there are people all over the world celebrating with us.
Cheers, Beaujolais.
Cheers.
For those who like the Beaujolais Nouveau.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, because some people have never
Absolutely.
had it before.
I've never had it.
There you go.
This one seems to carry a little bit more of a spice than the traditional Beaujolais of.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there, I'll go through a little difference. We have a couple of different ones there. That one I'll have to get open with a corkscrew.
I like it.
Yeah, so it's still fruity, but there's not as many tannins. Okay, so let's go through while you're sipping on that.
Wow.
Sorry.
You like it?
I'm not sure yet.
It slaps you in the face, but in a different way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
As I said, that's why I thought it was interesting. And then Stacy brought a bottle of classic Beaujolais, 2016. So I thought that'd be kind of cool after this. So we can do huge pours, just to try the classic Beaujolais afterwards, and you'll be able to see the difference, right? So same grape, might be from a different area within Beaujolais, but I'll go through that in a second. But I did have a little industry update, and I thought just because you're a travel girl that you'd be interested in this. Hilton is launching an urban micro hotel chain. You heard about that, Moto?
Yes.
So the cool thing is that I guess a lot of people are doing traveling. You get millennials traveling, that kind of thing. They travel in groups together. I think that they're not crazy about the classic hostel type environment, but they do want to stay together, very low cost type places, but still kind of funky with common spaces, that kind of thing. So Hilton's actually creating a economically viable hotel chain specifically for that crowd. So there's different room combinations. Some of them connect. Some of them have a double bed with a bunkie. Some of them have a classic regular standard room. You can also get some that have the bed pushed into a corner only so that you have more common space. There are like cafes or common spaces within these little things that are a cafe meeting space during the day that turn into a bar at night. So they're really kind of streamlining everything. I just thought it was a phenomenal thing.
That's interesting.
They said 30% of the rooms are going to be interconnected. So if you're traveling with a big group, right, and with all the common spaces, it's just like renting like a really
That'd be awesome for our dance moms.
Did they mention cost point?
Not in this article. It said most of the hotels are going to have 175 rooms on average. But yeah, so they're going to have 4 different styles of rooms. They're also going to allow, because they know that people are traveling together, when you're booking your hotel, there's ways for you to divvy up the payments right away.
Oh, I like that.
Is that not the coolest thing?
Yeah,
As opposed to, okay, now you owe me this and you owe me this.
Yeah.
And, right? It's very smart. Anyways, I was kind of...
That is really interesting. I'm assuming they're starting in the States?
I didn't say. I didn't make notes on that part. I was just calling just the concept of it. So I figure if Hilton's starting it, there's going to be others to follow. Yeah. So now if you're actually looking at going overseas, maybe some of the bigger states, I thought I saw something mentioned about Dallas, or maybe I read something else.
I only read like the headline of it, and I went, oh, I'll have to read that. So.
Oh, I read it for you.
Thank you.
That's what I do. I scroll through Twitter, and every time there's some magazine that posts an article or something, I tend to bookmark them. So, anyways, I thought that was really kind of cool. Okay, back to the wine. So I wanted to make it simple today. So as opposed to doing kind of big fancier things, classic thing, of course, to pair with Beaujolais Nouveau is usually a cheese, salamis, that kind of thing. So this is a dried salami. I forget the brand name of it,
wonderful.
but it has, but it's got cognac in it, which I thought was very French. And then I did a classic Gruyere, if you want something a little sharper. That's Brest Blue, because Stacy has to have her blue.
I love that blue.
It's so good. Yeah, so these are all from France. Gruyere is from Switzerland. Close enough, it's on the border.
It's French.
It's French-ish. And then the Morgon down at the end is basically one of those soft wine, and it's a little stinky. Norm came down earlier when I was setting up, and he went, "Smells like cheese in here."
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, so he's not found. I love the stinky cheeses. If you have to triple wrap your cheese to throw it in your fridge. That's my style. But it's very mild. So even those stinky cheeses, don't be afraid to try them because a lot of times they are very mild in flavor, and it's just that rind that's really giving off that odor. And unless it has a paper wrapper or something on it, most of the time they will not sell the cheese unless you can actually eat the rind. So if you happen to like all that funk, go nuts. And then another classic pairing from that area, whatever, would be something like a liver mousse of some sort. So I went back to a recipe I had bookmarked a while back that I hadn't tried yet from Alton Brown on the Food Network. So props up to him. This was his. But I doctored it a little. So I like the idea that he has apple in his. So fresh chicken livers were cooked with apple, and he uses onion. I had shallots in my fridge, so I wanted to use those up. He just uses thyme in his. I had herbe de Provence pre-mix. So I grabbed some of that and threw that in there. And then he always puts in a little bit of brandy in his, and I thought I'd one-up him and do some Armagnac because I happen to have some. As one does. Doesn't everyone have some Armagnac they want to use up?
Don't get me started.
So Armagnac actually, for those of you who are not familiar with it, Armagnac actually is a style of cognac, which is a style of brandy from the area of town of Armagnac. So it's just a little more exclusive, and I had a little bit left, and it just sounds more exciting to say I put Armagnac in the mousse. Deke's been snacking on it.
Yeah,
And he
it's
said it was
good.
good.
It's very nice. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, something light and just toasted baguettes and stores in the fridge. And the cool thing about mousses. I guess
Cynthia
you don't say
also.
meats,
Cynthia
right?
has a mountain of this stuff.
Yeah, I haven't decided yet. The jury's still out as I'm shoveling it down my list.
she's shoveling it.
I don't think I've ever had a chicken liver pate before. And I think that's where I'm like, it's definitely a liver.
And it's a mousse, meaning, so there's apple. I told you there's apple and the shallots in there. Touch of white pepper and salt, of course. I didn't over salt it because I didn't want it to be
I
overpowering.
think it's the apple that's throwing me off 'cause it's different. It's not
'cause it's-
unexpected, but it's very fresh tasting.
Yeah.
Very light.
And it's lighter than, so classic pâtés would be almost all the steps up to what I did today. So the basically cooking everything together and then throwing it in a food processor, and then you kind of put it into a mold or whatever and kind of pack it down, and that's kind of your pâté. For the mousse, all you're doing is taking heavy cream and whipping it until it's pretty
Nice and
much
fluffy.
medium to firm peaks, and then you just fold it in at the last minute. So most things that you want to make a mousse, that's basically all you're doing is taking something that's a little thicker. Another cool tip I used to tell people all the time is if you wanted to make like a chocolate mousse, you can cheat. I know so many shortcuts.
Oh.
Chocolate pudding, standard old chocolate pudding. So if you
Just whip it more.
and no, you just take the chocolate pudding. You can even
it
use the
into the whipped cream?
containers and take the whipped cream separately and fold one into the other. Done.
Oh,
And then you can
really?
be all fancy and put in like chocolate mousse and do fruit and all that kind of stuff, and you have instant parfaits by using like pre-made pudding, right? So as much as I'm always trying to teach people like to make pudding from scratch and everything.
What a great tip, though.
Yeah. it's
Yeah.
nice, huh?
So just think of all the same thing when it comes to chocolate, classic chocolate mousses or a white chocolate mousse. I'll do something similar where I'll take white chocolate and melting it down, right? And then you can use like egg whites or whatever else, and until it kind of congeals together, and then it's kind of as it's getting thicker, and then you're again mixing in the whipped cream to it.
You know, we could do a half show where you buy a portion of what you're making and you add something that's homemade together and you pretend it's yours, but you actually did it.
Oh yeah, we'll do
Right? Because
Yeah,
it's those
cheaters.
tips, but it's those tips, right, that make it that way, and it's
Yeah.
really great.
Cheater
Well-
recipes.
Well, at our next episode 2 weeks from now for the quick baking treats, that's one of the things. A lot of mine are little shortcuts, because as much as I love having like little sweets and stuff like that at Christmas, I always find that no one's ever eating it, and I have such an overstocked pantry of stuff
Yeah.
that I'm always looking for ways to use up
it
what
up.
I have, right? And so I kind of came up with some of those, but I'm not
You're
going to
have to
divulge it
come-
now. You're
I'm
have
gonna
to
have to
check it.
come get you to come through my pantry to figure out what I can do with half my stuff.
Yeah, or I can bring you some of the stuff from my pantry and.
Now the
I can get rid of
all the pantry
We'll
things come.
swap.
Ooh, pantry swap. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 2019. Let's get back to the Beaujolais. Okay, so Beaujolais Nouveau. A couple of things. When it's saying Beaujolais Nouveau, there is a difference between the Nouveau and then the classic Beaujolais. Sometimes you'll see labels that say Beaujolais Village, and then sometimes you'll actually see a Cru Beaujolais on some of the vintage labels. If you're watching the video here, it's harder to see, but I'm going to overlay it. Listening to the audio podcast, I'm going to have all these photos and stuff in the show notes for you. So if I go back to here, so there's the map.
Fancy.
Fancy. Look at us being fancy with the Apple TV. So you see where it says Burgundy region? There's a little town called Beaune. So the Beaune is the town that's the capital of Burgundy. So almost everywhere in Burgundy, any red wine is Pinot Noir. So I teach that in the Burgundy classes. But then if you go down, so just south of that, it's still considered part of the Burgundy overall region, but they make Beaujolais down there. But they don't use Pinot Noir. They actually use the Gamay grape. So there's a long history of it. Gamay grape was probably, they said it was discovered in that Beaujolais region, which is one of the reasons that it was kind of named that. There's a little town called Gamay down there, back in like the 1300s. And it was, I want to say, the bastard son of the Pinot Noir. It's not quite the, it's not part of it. It's a completely different varietal. But I guess it just started growing well there because of the soils or something. And it always seemed to ripen faster than the Pinot Noir did, because Pinot Noir is notoriously very fickle to grow, fickle to harvest, that kind of thing.
That explains why it's my favorite.
Yes, it's a little high maintenance. So the Gamay grape, okay, princess. So
Jake is laughing, trying not to like totally blurt out right now. I can see the look on her face.
So the Gamay grape, because it ripened quicker and there was more of it, and it was a little bit more, wasn't as fussy for harvesting than the Pinot Noir grape. There were people in that area that started to harvest it and try to make wine out of it. But of course, the upper crust in the Burgundy region were kind of appalled that somebody would dare use something other than the royal loved Pinot Noir, that they kind of just sort of shunned it aside. So technically, the Beaujolais Nouveau was created to get rid of all that extra Gamay stuff. And the French are notoriously talented at marketing. So they decided to, how do we get people to get excited about all this Gamay wine? We're going to have a festival. So there's actually an entire festival called the Beaujolais Nouveau Day, and it's always that certain time of the thing, and they make a big deal out of it, and then they it's going to be released. It's usually only about 6 weeks old by the time it's released on that Thursday. So that's why it's called Nouveau.
That makes sense based on the type of flavor we're getting though as well too.
It's very
because
fresh.
it's not like a full bodied. It's
Exactly.
very
Correct.
light
And it also has to do with how it's made, which is slightly different. So I'm not going to go into all the technical details because it gets a little bit. So there, it gets
It
a little
almost
nerdy.
feels like it's aerated.
Yeah. So
little bit.
So it's called carbonic fermentation.
Oh.
So as opposed to taking the grapes and smushing them, adding the yeast to start the fermentation process, they are actually whole bunches. The grapes whole are put into like a big vat. Carbon dioxide is put into the vat and it's sealed. So it's usually for a couple of days for Beaujolais Nouveau. And all it does is that carbon dioxide kind of, with a chemical reaction, gets oxygen to release, and the fermentation process naturally starts inside the grape.
Oh.
So it's starting already, and then they take it out, and then they go and put it through the press and everything else before then. Then they'll kind of finish the process, but it still only sits 6 weeks. Yeah, it's kind of cool, eh?
So it's fermented before it's pressed.
Kind of, yeah, but it's only up to about 2% alcohol. So it
Right.
only gets up to a certain level. So to get it to go the rest of the way, they still have to do the secondary process. So depending on how long it's done and how much of the carbon part is done and how much stayed whole and how much got crushed, depending on the size of the vats, sometimes it's called like semi-carbonic. Anyways, it's a
So is
nerd.
the grape is actually called Beaujolais, or is it a
Gamay.
Gamay?
It is a Gamay.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's-
there are wines that are Gamay Noirs, are there not?
There is. I actually brought one here today from a local Q vineyards in Niagara. So there's a few areas that are actually growing Gamay quite well. One of them happens to be our Niagara region here in Ontario. Oregon right now, which has a similar climate to the Niagara region, they're really starting to grow a lot of Gamay. So besides that, and then the other area in France would be the Loire Valley. So that would be that area up in green. They're also using it, but they don't usually produce single varietal Gamays. They're usually used in blends with Cab Franc and everything else for some of their Loire brands.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just in the Beaujolais region and in the Loire region.
Yes, those are the two places that really kind of there's probably winemakers, but everywhere in France has their own set of rules of what they're allowed, what grape varietals, right? So I mean, people can experiment, but they may not be able to export it or mass produce it, right? So there's
Sorry for that interruption of what kind of grape it was. I felt
no,
like
that's what
I
I wanted to do, because if
so
you're asking,
confused.
somebody else want to be asking
I
too.
have to say that Beaujolais Nouveau with that blue cheesy stuff.
Really
Sorry,
good.
I forget the name of the blue cheese.
Breast blue.
So that is phenomenal together. Like
I had
whole
the
other
breast
level.
blue on the salami.
Oh.
Then I drank the wine.
And
It
how was that?
I agree with
Next
Cynthia,
level.
but like next level.
Okay, let's next level.
Okay, let's
this
try
stuff.
it.
Okay, you guys are funny.
We're becoming new pairings.
Oh, and if I didn't mention it, that chicken liver mousse recipe is going to be, of course, in the show notes as well. And I did give a shout out to Elton Brown on Food Network. I would never say that it's my recipe. I just tweaked his. And I put a link in that, so if you want to see his original recipe, you can do that too. So I mentioned it's a third Gamay grape. I talked to you about, so the big saying that they always talk about, or it's part of their festival, you can see it in the back of that sign, says Le Beaujolais, you'll always see Le Beaujolais Nouveau est arrivé. So I mentioned there's different kinds of Beaujolais that you can find aside from the Nouveau. So classic Beaujolais, like this Pistrou that you brought, this is basically gone through that similar process, and it's just barrel aged.
After the fact.
Right. So depending on when, so this one's from 2016, right? So it's just going to be, it's not necessarily aged for a long period of time, but it's going to be, that's the classic standard version of a Beaujolais.
Okay.
So Beaujolais Nouveau, Beaujolais is the next level up. So that one's been aged a little bit. Then there's the Beaujolais Village, and that just refers to, I'm trying to tie this back into the old Burgundy classes. So it just has to do with a different classification, meaning that there are vineyards and areas within that region that have been graded as a little bit better than, right? So there's Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village. So a lot of times if you're looking at a red Burgundy wine, they're going to have a name of a particular area on it. And that's usually called a village wine or the village style. And it's usually, in Burgundy, it's like a little bit up the slope, right? A little bit more on the south-facing side. And then the next one would be the Cru Burgundy. So that would be similar reference to the Grand Crus and the Premier Crus of the Burgundy region. So same idea. It's just even a higher classification. Those ones will be even smaller quantities. So it's very rare that we're going to get those higher end ones here in Northern Ontario. It's
Are you
just
saying that the French society is susceptible to classism? Let the meat
Possibly.
cake, baby. Let the meat cake.
let them make cake. Yeah, exactly. A la Marie Antoinette. Anyways, I thought that was kind of cool. So one of the other things I thought was, he commented right away when I took it out, and he went, "You chilled the wine," right? Partly because you'll notice that there's very low tannins in this wine. It has to do with the fact that, remember they said the grapes were whole when the part of the fermentation started? Usually the color of the wine and all that tannins, it's because the skins and the crushing part of it that's done ahead of time, it has longer time to sit and ferment and macerate, right? So you're getting all the tannins from the stems, the seeds, and the skins. This because a lot of it's happening in there, and then they do a quick crush kind of thing to finish it off, and it's finished. It just doesn't have a long time to absorb and create those natural tannins in it. So it's a little bit easier. It's not as dry as maybe other ones will. You can take a look. We'll open that one next.
So I think I found it interesting because it's a red wine.
Yep.
In a clear bottle.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
No, that's just that producer. So that's another one here. That's the Beaujolais Village Nouveau. So remember I said
Fancy one.
that's a fancy
That's
one.
when we need the corkscrew for.
Yes. Then you put a cork through.
See, that's what
But if you remember, we went through the other episodes.
I know corkscrew.
Nothing
does not
wrong
mean
with
fancy.
screw tops.
That's what I was drinking yesterday, but the Beaujolais while I was baking.
Oh, yes. And Stacy was drinking and baking yesterday, and then texting me some garbly gook.
Clearly, I missed out on that one.
She forgot something, and then she started. So she actually was talking to herself via text, like what? But I wasn't even there.
No.
Yeah, it was one of those. She's like, "Oh, and I think I ran out of the. Guess I'm gonna have to go to the store. Oh, but I'm drinking. Oh, I didn't have that much. Like she's kind of talking to herself while she's texting. It was funny.
It was like I knew you were there. It was like someone's listening.
And every
to
once in a
me.
while, my phone buzzes, and I look at it. I'm like, okay, I'll get back to her later. She's not finished yet, which is fine. So, anyways, that's an example of the Beaujolais. I will have the. Not only am I going to have the links to the two. For those of you who are living in Ontario, you'll have the links so you can find them at your own local LCBO. However, I also listed within the LCBO all of them. So all of the wines, the Beaujolais Nouveaux, are getting released today. So you'll actually get to see all of the ones that are available in Ontario that were getting released to the 2018s. And then you can go and search them and link them that way.
And how long are they on the shelf for? Is this like
Till they're gone.
till they're gone, which usually lasts
It really
Is it hard
depends
to
on
find
how many
around
ladies like with the shopping cart like I found today.
by New Year's? Would you have a hard time finding it?
It depends on the stores who ordered them in. So if your liquor store is or no, a small remote one and you don't have a lot of wine drinkers in your town, but that store decided to order in a few cases, you
Right.
may have a few stragglers kicking around.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just one of those things to sort of check. Or if you can always just call your local store and just say, hey, I'm just checking to see if you have any left.
And if you really love it, you can get them to order a case in for you.
But it's funny, a lot of them, not for the Nouveau.
Oh, they won't let
Yeah.
you order it in.
So
No,
in
there's
other
just
words,
none.
get it now.
Whatever they had, they sent it to the stores. So a lot of them will show inventory at the stores, but zero online.
I have had an offer from an LCBO once to actually transfer it in from another store.
But for Nouveau,
Well, not for Nouveau, it was for something else, but just
Oh, you'll see.
it'd be worth asking.
see, this Nouveau is like a little chicky.
So, and this Nouveau stuff, this Nouveau stuff, this Beaujolais Nouveau, I'm so refined.
I feel the same way.
This
Like
new
what?
Oh,
Nouveau
like
This
sauce.
new
Great.
Nouveau thing, it's, so it says, it's bottled like 6 weeks ago or whatever, so is this is not meant to be cellared.
No, we're
This
supposed
is
to have
like, drink this now.
it. Hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you should
that's-
like
that's
buy a
pretty
case
cool
now and
concept.
drink between now and Christmas.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would. Like, yeah.
No, Stacy.
Is
Living
that a
at
challenge?
home on
Were you
your
looking?
own,
Were you
buying
looking for a
case and
challenge?
drinking it between now and Christmas
Next
is
week.
not really good life advice. Let me just put that out there.
Well, no, I think so. Let's count about the description. There's enough in a week. I mean, there's only 2 bottles a
Hey,
week.
listen,
Come on.
12 in a case is 12 days of Christmas.
Right.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So
I'm
it's
thinking
pretty.
about-
It's pretty sad that we just started
So
doing
when
math
Stacey, when Stacy comes over
So
for
my
Christmas
you can see
dinner,
my eyes moving.
to figure out
Are we
how.
bringing you?
I'll
Beaujolais Nouveau?
have to have Mark pick you up for Christmas dinner. Is what we're saying. So
I'll snowshoe.
She made, with a bottle.
sled with your Beaujolais behind you.
I'm like a little wine cask.
Speaking of Christmas, that's one of the things that Beaujolais and Beaujolais Nouveau are both actually really great served with turkey.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I bet you this would be good with turkey.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
turkey
Like a
and the
red-
cranberries and that
Yeah, but I
whole
said
dinner
it
thing.
first.
Oh well, whatever,
I did though.
whatever.
Okay.
Apparently
Pardon
Pete
my
said
tickle.
first, but I
As
was
much
like-
as I got rid of my cold. Excuse me. As much as I got rid of my cold, I just haven't been speaking this much whatever since last week.
I even think about like the thyme and the rosemary and stuff like the seasonings that you tend to have with turkey. I
Yeah.
Oh, that would really enhance.
Yeah.
Mental note: let's pick up some Beaujolais Nouveau for
We're gonna
Christmas.
have to work on that in the next couple days. We'll be like,
Okay, so now I mentioned that for pairing suggestions. So of course, so besides your cheese plates and stuff like that. So technically, flavor wise, with the berry flavors and everything else, think of what you would like to pair with a Pinot Noir, right? So you can do that roast chicken, roast turkey.
Right.
I like duck if it's a stronger one. I wouldn't necessarily with the Beaujolais Nouveau with a duck because sometimes duck can be very strong or gamey. So then I would go with maybe closer to a Beaujolais or Beaujolais Village for that, just
I'm
because
gonna
it's
have
aged a
to
little more.
test it with my red Twizzlers then.
Oh my God, you and your Twizzlers.
Although I find
I
that
don't want to wait for you to. I want to test it now.
Oh no, she's talking about
But it's talking about
Twizzlers.
pairings because Pinot Noir, like a more full-bodied Pinot Noir, not a light one.
probably was
A full-bodied
I don't know
Pinot
if
Noir
that's a
with
good wine, I don't
Twizzlers
know.
is my
Yeah.
favorite
Yeah,
candy
I
wine
Uh-huh.
pairing.
I've
Yeah.
never
So
never
good.
done the candy one.
Yeah,
thing.
Pinot
I've
Noir
done chocolate
with
and
Twizzlers.
wine.
Person
Pinot
on the,
Noir with
at
red
the LCBO
Twizzlers.
just
Ah.
directed me and said, this
As
one's
a
good, this one's
straw?
good. I'm like, okay.
You know when you
Could
bite
be.
both ends?
Could be.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Could
So this
be.
one is also a little tingly on the end of the tongue. It could probably be opened a little bit. You know how Pinot Noir sometimes is a little
Yeah, I need
delicate
to
and you
let
need to let it sit and aerate. Like I find the Nouveau, trying these back to back, that Nouveau is I find easier to drink now than this. And it's because this I almost need to let it sit.
That's what I found last night when I opened the one that was just, I had a little sip at first and I was like,
No, it
This is
is.
like-
It just needs to I would pour it out or decant it.
Yeah.
And it's again if you're not familiar with it,
Oh,
but the
yeah.
more you're eating, again, when you have a wine that is finding a little too young and you get that little tingle at the end of your tongue, I usually like to suggest to have fat. There was no other way of saying it. Fat
cheese.
will work with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cheese and the salami and heavier meats and things like
Confit
that.
potatoes.
Yeah, and pates and mousses and
Oh la la.
So now, as you say this, we just poured this in my glass. So now, if I want a drink of wine, I need to basically drink it out of the bottle here. because that we want to.
We do have other glasses.
We're all family. Go for it.
You should have seen me baking.
They told you to take pictures. Did you take pictures?
I didn't. No, I did not want to be seen.
Yeah, take pictures of your food. I thought it'd be funny.
Oh.
I didn't say take
Not your
selfies.
alcoholic tendencies.
I seriously want no. I was saying like take pictures as you're going along the baking process. It'd be funny if the wine's in behind, but I wasn't waiting for you to go like this.
What happens when you put us all in the same room again, Steph? It's all chaos from there.
So the other thing was the serving temperature, what I was trying to talk about. So the Beaujolais Nouveau is best served chilled. Not as chilled as a white wine, but pretty close. Okay. So, wine, I would say 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, right? So it's a little bit, it's not quite like really cold Pinot Grigio kind of chilled, but yes, chilled a little bit. So usually the best time would be like an hour in the fridge. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was running behind, so I popped those puppies in the freezer, which is not always a good idea. Don't do that. But I was in a hurry because I wanted to have it a little bit chilled just to get it going. It's like, don't just pop it in the freezer. I was in a hurry.
Or in the snowbank outside.
And it's because I was too busy fighting with some technology at the same time. Snowbank would, yeah. As long as you remember where you put it.
That was our Christmas dinners. When we were younger, all of our family,
beer and
all the
stuff
stuff
was
was
out there?
outside.
Yep.
In your deck. Or
Have
in
you
your
guys ever
backyard.
tried the trick where you wet paper towel and you wrap it around the bottle and you stick it in the freezer?
What does that do?
Oh, it like makes its own container.
It makes its own like
Like
a
ice
ice thing.
layer around the
I'm getting regret Christmas.
Oh, next time.
I have to say, so as the non-connoisseur of the group, as I can't even sit up at this point, for the moms who like can't plan and test to make sure that it's 12 to 15 degrees, which as Steph is saying, I'm thinking, oh my God, but no, I respect that people are looking for that specific, but honest to God, like if this is 4 degrees out of the fridge, I still feel like as a less connoisseur type person, it would be really nice, fresh and light.
Mm-hmm. It is. I just find that as it gets too warm, you're not going to get.
This is too warm, maybe. Is it?
I don't think so too bad. 'Cause I
No?
put it in the fridge for about a half an hour,
Yeah.
so it wasn't quite. No, but this doesn't need to be. So the more it's
no?
aged.
Just a nouveau.
Oh.
So usually my
right.
rule of thumb is to make it easier. The lighter the wine, the colder it can be.
Oh, the newer. Okay.
Okay. So no, the lighter the wine. So white wines, heavier whites.
Okay.
Heavier whites can actually be served. Like sometimes you go to wineries, like in California, and they're actually serving their Chardonnay samples, especially those heavier Chardonnays. They're actually serving them almost room temp. No. And for people who are, but that's the ideal temperature for a really big, heavy, buttery Chardonnay.
Really?
And that's to get the exact flavor. If you want to chill it yourself, but for you to get the proper taste of it, sometimes they're actually serving it to you that way. The winemakers are.
Okay.
So I mean, you just don't have to go.
It's barrel tasting. It's kind of like sometimes you kind of go, okay.
Almost like an oaky kind of.
Yeah.
So just so keep that in mind. So the Beaujolais Nouveau, an hour in the fridge will do it. So if you're doing a Beaujolais Nouveau party shortly between now and the holidays, I would say the best timing, especially if you're going to do like this cheese and meats thing, which is kind of fun before dinner, right? I would say at the same time, so you're going to take the Beaujolais Nouveau and you're going to put it in the fridge. Go about getting stuff set up or whatever. And then an hour, at the same time you put let me go back. Like rewind, making a rewind sound.
That's a Stephanie edit.
Yeah. So the Beaujolais Nouveau, when you put it in the fridge, you take out the cheese. Cheese really needs to be sitting out for almost an hour at room temperature to be at the proper serving temperature.
Really?
Yes. So when you take out the cheese to make your cheese board, put in the Beaujolais Nouveau in the fridge.
So sorry, everyone.
And then within an hour, your cheese and your wine will both be at the same
makes
temperature.
sense.
Right? Because one takes an hour yet.
So am I the only one who tried the regular Beaujolais yet?
I've
No,
tried it.
we're all having it.
I've tried it.
I enjoy it.
Thoughts?
I'm
You
well.
don't like it?
Yesterday,
Tell us
that's
how
the
you feel.
thing. Yesterday, when I thought I honestly thought it was the Beaujolais Nouveau, and I had it while I was baking. And the first sips or two, I was like, oh, I've never had this. And I'm like, not sure I'll go to it. But then it sat for a while, and it actually developed a really nice sort of feeling to it. And I started drinking. I'm like, oh, I drank the whole bottle, okay? To be honest with you. But the thing is it's not my favorite.
No.
Now having that, I think I would drink the
Like
Nouveau
I find
over.
this like it started out full body, you're like ooh,
Yeah.
and then it had like a
It thins
metallic
out,
aftertaste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Almost bitter.
yeah.
Yeah.
You just went at the end of it, and I just went ooh.
But you have to experiment, just like any other wines. Like a Merlot in one place and a Merlot in another are going to be different. And even within the Beaujolais region, there's different smaller areas, like sub-regions within there, and they're all going to have their own terroir, their own climate, their own whatever, their own winemaker style. So you kind of need to figure out your producers and who you like and don't like.
So again, Peace-Drew is the producer. So I mean, other producers are in different areas. You might get
Other
a different
Beaujolais might be
flavor.
better.
Correct. So
Gotcha.
don't give up on Beaujolais.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm on the search then.
And now you know that this is the second time you've had, and you said it's better once it sits, and you liked it
Yes.
opened up a little bit more.
I did. Like I waited about a half hour, 45 minutes to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, this
So
kinda
just plan
reminds
ahead.
me-
I'm going to drink this around this time, and then just open it up early.
Just have another glass of
No.
something ahead of time.
Yeah. No, I'm just gonna drink my Nouveau out of the bottle.
Did you just chug that whole glass down?
Go, Deke, go.
People are going to start to think that we were drinking before we started taping this show. I couldn't find.
I
Did
wish
you
we
see
had
my
a Zoom
T-shirt? I
right on
couldn't
that.
put a it's
Yeah,
my rosé.
that's not Beaujolais.
I know I couldn't find a Beaujolais T-shirt, but I put my rosé T-shirt on. I also have a champagne one too. So
I do. I've got a couple of champagne ones.
I know. So if you can find me a Beaujolais Nouveau
So
T-shirt.
if I follow the advice from our last episode, I might be able to fit in those champagne T-shirts at some point again.
That was a great episode.
That was-
it?
yeah,
We were
yeah.
talking how we
Yes.
all couldn't fit in our clothes when we came back from our
Yes.
holiday, and I haven't sorted that out at all yet.
I was snacking on that trail mix with the Smarties in my car today.
But can you fit in last year's winter coat?
Yes.
I win.
Okay. I don't like it. I need to get another one, but
This is what happens when you join this podcast. You can't fit into your clothes after. Just saying.
work hazard. Okay, I think that's about it. We have a lot. So after we're taping this episode, we're taping the baking one that I mentioned for 2 weeks from now. But as you're watching this, next week is going to be the whiskey show from the Alibi Room. So we're doing that
So
tomorrow.
excited.
So it's sold out, which is yay! A sold out show.
Fancy.
Yes.
No pressure at all.
No
It's in my
pressure.
hair.
Right? And makeup.
I'm gonna need to Skype you.
So I'm still figuring out the audio things.
Well, the
I want
guideliner
the
for you
sound
will
to
be
be a little bit better than it
Well,
was at
guideliner
the
will be
live show we did in September. As much as everyone in the room could hear us and everything was great, essentially we're using the audio from the recording device, the video recording device, unless I can kind of figure out a speakers thing with our local music center, because I'm playing around with my mixer. And anyways, again, still learning. But anyways, that's going to be a fun show. So you're going to learn a little bit about whiskey. So that's next week. The following week is going to be the Christmas baking one. So it's all our quick shortcuts and stuff like that for the holidays. So you don't feel overwhelmed and you can still kind of put out some treats for your family and friends. And then the week after that, there's that Christmas treats, whiskey, Australia.
Long-awaited
Australian
Australia
trip.
episode.
Yes, I gave her a couple of weeks because she's got so
I needed
many
a couple
things.
weeks. I've had a lot of stuff going on, so I'm working on. I'm securing my second interview to go over that kind of stuff, and then I'll send it
So
off to Steph
excited.
for
Okay.
editing.
I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, so that'll
No
be the
nerves
whole
at all.
Australia one. And then while I'm in California next week, I decided while I'm there that besides just going to visit wineries and stuff, I want to take a lot more videos, and I'll try to do some impromptu interviews while I can. But it is also around the time of Thanksgiving down in the States, so it's going to be quite busy with tourists and stuff. So me kind of saying that, okay, stop, everyone needs to be quiet for a second.
I need to do an interview in the middle of all of this.
So I'll sort of play it by ear and whatever I can get. I will definitely do a crew take for sure about the Palm Springs and Temecula area. But if I have a chance to collect enough interviews and video stuff or whatever, and I'll put together a podcast for that for the end of the year. But I got a couple of other things happening for the end of the year, including like I want to do another Christmas episode that is specific to like kind of Christmas tradition type things. Because I've did one on my own last year back before when I was by myself on my podcast.
No,
that go?
wait a minute.
We do?
No, because we did Thanksgiving. I remember us doing
Yes.
a Thanksgiving episode. So
Yeah,
she
we
just
did do
rejected us
Thanksgiving
for the Christmas episode. Though.
Was it?
Yeah.
But didn't we? Because it's
Because I remember us doing Thanksgiving.
no,
last
but
year.
that's this.
Or was it Easter?
No, it's this Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
You guys
Yeah,
only
we did
started
this
in January.
Thanksgiving. Yeah, we started.
Maybe
in
it was.
January.
Oh, maybe it was the Easter one. I apologize. I
Yeah,
just remember
that
talking
was
about
an Easter
turkey
one.
and yeah, so it was Easter. You're right. You were alone
I
at Christmas.
know I did my alone at Christmas. He's all alone.
I just stay quiet over here. And
Yeah.
go, oh, okay, really? Okay.
We'll figure it out. Anyways, a lot of that kind of stuff. Getting ready for the new year. We're kind of planning, and then we can talk about stuff happening in 2019. Anyways, lots happening. So make sure you're subscribing so you can kind of follow along on however you are listening to us or watching us. So whether that's on YouTube or whether you're listening to us in any of your podcast players, including now iHeartRadio.
I saw that.
Yes, so that's just one more player that you can find us on. So basically any mobile device or your old clunky computer, because right on the flyingforflavor.ca there's built-in players right there, so you can actually just, so if your dad or grandma wants to hear an episode or you want them, you can email it the link to them and they can actually just go and hit play, which is kind of cool. I think that's about it. I don't know if you guys have anything else.
Nope, that's it. That
Nope.
was again.
Thank you for all
Okay,
the
I want
info.
to dive
Yeah.
into this chicken liver
learned
mousse
a lot.
before, and I can't do that while I'm on the camera.
What?
I knew he was going to sneak that in for you. Anyways, until next week. Oh, wait a minute. I need to.
Oh,
I can't cheers without an empty glass.
wait.
Yeah. Good.
Oh my God, we are so family. Cheers.
Cheers. Chug it.
What do you think about us podcasters doing this whole video thing? If you like what you see and you still have wine in your glass, there's more videos down below that you can always keep up. Or subscribe and you'll never miss another one.